I would like to start with Lourdes, bringing the point of view of the private sector on the approval of the bid and the challenges on regulation. How the private sector see it, what's necessary now for us to be able to guarantee integrity environment so we can effectively have a market with integrity. Guys, hear me? First of all, I would like to thank the Alliance and other panelists for the invitation to share some experiences here, ACX experience in this very exciting moment for those who are in this climate agenda already a while. From voluntary to regulated, bring this perspective, this view on how the things are going to become implemented in this moment of transition, where we see coexisting voluntary credits and some jurisdictions for carbon credits. Some carbon credits starting being regulated in Brazil with our bid, our celebrated law, and all the challenges it's going to bring with it. ACX, it's a carbon market, and its main goal is to bring technology solutions that can bring more celerity to these operations, reducing costs of these transactions. One of the problems of those transactions are the costs. In Brazil, we are working 1.5 years already through a partnership with B3, integrating our market with the registry of titularity from the credits that were started by B3 in Brazil. We look at the implementation of the SBCE with a lot of excitement, lots of expectation, with hope. So those demands can be solved with more transparency. We see today a market suffering, the voluntary market is suffering with the volume of the operations. And today we have some difficulties bring this demand in a more concrete way. So we can make possible this flow of investment for the projects in environment in Brazil. We see from this point of view, from this perspective, the implementation of the SBCE, the registry for carbon credit, how those technologies are going to be implemented, how the offsets are going to be, what percentage is going to be, what kind of projects are going to be elected on this environment. And we should not forget the Article 56 that treats about the volume of demand of the insurance companies for carbon credits. In parallel, other assets being developed in the Brazilian market, SIGOBs and SAFs and other instruments for carbon credits. That's the way we see our role, trying to contribute with clarity and transparency for the market, bringing gain in speed of transactions on those operations. Thank you, Lourdes. Our expectative here is to find this norm environment so we can implement this transformation agenda in financial assets with solidity. And the role of the market and the federal government should establish this environment. And Fabio, I would like to invite Fabio, representing this company, public-private company, that is responsible for the environmental assets, how the state establishing this normative environment to guarantee the integrity of the credits. Good afternoon. Thank you, Julie. I'd like to thank in name of the state of Pará for the invitation to be part of this debate. The state of Pará is proud to be part of that. Register here. Thanks of Ricardo being part of the alliance for the support, and the executive board is in sync with the course of University of Carbon, and is very fruitful. The Company of Environmental Assets from Paraná started in the end of 2024, taking the role on support this agenda, which was only from the Environment Secretary at the time. We are connected to the development of the jurisdiction of those assets, and beyond that, these activities, monitoring activities, the salvaguarda of those assets, one of our missions is to go to the market, to scale taking care of those assets we generate. In this timeline, the state of Pará, got the honor to receive some technical capacities donations for the development of its jurisdictional system, with the support from the interest of buy of carbon credits by some institutions. This role, bringing to the market this effort for development in the jurisdiction of carbon credits with integrity, is what the company is going to focus on the next months. Bringing to the market the way we are developing this jurisdiction. For sure, having communitary participation, quilombos, traditional communities, indigenous population, and small farmers, demonstrating that the company, at the same time, has the entrepreneurial bias and also public policies. Once the whole revenue created by carbon credits sales coming from forests is destined majorly to the distribution to benefits for those communities. That's a challenge that ACAP is taking on, but is bringing great satisfaction to us who is taking part on this project. Thank you, Fagner. So the explanation that the state has competencies on the Environment Secretary connected with safeguard and the mechanism for public policies to fighting deforestation and the forest fires, and the company itself, which is innovation for this environment, making possible the commercialization of carbon credits. On the same segue, on the necessity to establish this legal environment for carbon credit, I would like to invite Renata Coutinho, bringing her competencies of CONAHED in the same way is defined on CBC. Good afternoon. I'm testing here if it is hard to speak and hear ourselves at the same time. Thank you for the invitation. It's an honor being here with Marcello, Fagner, Lourdes. I was able to follow the work at Pará and Tocantins as well. So we have a history to share with you. I'm happy to be here. The National Commission for HED Plus, is in the sphere of the policies for fires on this extraordinary secretary for control of deforestation. In this movement, the law 15,042 brought, bringing the authority designated for the Article 6 is to restructure the Ministry of Environment to have more power, more drive on this agenda, to accelerate the things in the level they need to be accelerated. As we all know, to make this wheel turn in the public service, it takes time. Understand there is some expectation in the environment. Ministry of Environment is restructuring itself to make everything flow better. It's important to mention that not only the Ministry of Finance is also working on the SBCE, and MMA is also restructuring itself. So HEDGE is going to be allocated on the Secretary of Climate Change to sync that with Article 6. This movement is already happening. It's important for the society to know it as being part of this process, and this has to happen very soon. And going back to CONAHED has the representation of 10 ministers, have representatives from the civil society, some traditional communities and indigenous communities. So it's very representative space that we want to create with participation of civil society and different representations in this great scope that we have to create to establish for the national strategy for HED Plus. Since 2023, it's important to remember that CONAHED is becoming 10 years this year, and since 2023, we put in place 3 work groups: safeguard, share of benefits, and out management. Along this decade of work, it's important to understand the Ministry of Environment established a strategy of HED Plus in 2016. We need to update because in these last 10 years, a lot happened in this way, and we need to reflect on our national strategy on this front, bringing new competencies for CONAHED. In these 10 years of work, the Ministry of Environment also submitted through the CONAHED 4 levels of reference. How can we measure how Brazil is reducing its deforestation? We're able to move forward in these levels of forestal emissions. We conclude the Amazonia forest, and now included the Brazilian savanna. And the last reference, we included all the Brazilian biomas. And this is a big step forward and for the society as a whole. And we were able as well, through this reference, to demonstrate more than 9 billion of CO2 tons that we were able to reduce since 2006 and 2020 through Amazonia and Brazilian savanna. With this framework of work we established in these last 10 years, were able to gather more than 1.5 million and 900 millions for the project Plus Forest, supporting many states, with the green funds for climate. So we were able to gather lots of funds throughout our results. And today, CONAHED being eligibility to the Brazilian index. All this decade that work we have was able to enable the states to do also the gathering of integrity and safeguard of those credits. We have 9 institutions working with us, BNDES and other institutions. And this distribution of resources was established through it. The limit of gathering of funds, we can do 6% in between the states and at the federal level as well. In Mato Grosso, the way to gather more than $100 million through this project. Well, it's also notable to mention that through this bid, CONAHED got new attributions connected to the safeguard and also in the process of inclusion. establishment of the technologies and the role to hear how we're going to work the safeguard of those policies. It's important to mention that Kona had interpreted the safeguard of Cancun for the Brazilian context since 2017. We published 2 summaries on safeguard. We are working on the review of indicators on the system of safeguard to understand how Brazil is respecting the right of traditional communities and indigenous populations, giving them the right of participation on this and governance. And our 7 meetings on the task force on safeguard, we're able to, in May this year, to approve and go ahead a resolution that bring directives for the implementation of projects and jurisdiction on collective territories. It was a big, very important step on the role of CONAHED on this framework. How can we guarantee the rights and the safeguard aligned to the levels of jurisdiction on these projects, jurisdictional and state level as well, or federal. Just to conclude in the role of CONAHED on this bid is also the process for exclusion of areas, register of new areas and exclusion of areas. CONAHED has a very important role to receive from the institutions that want to develop private projects and exclude them for jurisdiction. They can relate that to CONAHED. This is our priority now, which would be do the regulation of the exclusion of those areas. What should be the documentation for us to guarantee the integrity on this request for exclusion? That can be very difficult in judicial way, and that's where we are concentrating now to move forward on the regulation of this whole process. I would like to conclude now, and then we can talk more about it later.
Thank you, Roberta. You were talking about the important approach of the country in the policies in the environmental level and the RED and the requirements in the state, right? And the state of Acre was a pioneer. Even before the requirements, they already had established contracts and agreements with the German bank to implement some programs in the state of Mato Grosso in 2017. Also, most of the states of legal Amazon, they are eligible. This way we can understand that Brazil actually has this agenda of carbon credit and carbon market that is consolidated in the public policy environment and in the private sector. We have initiatives that are valuable and they contribute to the territory. We are able to identify the results in the territory beyond conservation and areas preservation, but also to implement actions that foster the bioeconomy. And bioeconomy is attached to cultural appreciation and appreciation of the people. This is about the live territories. It's the way of their lives being aligned with all the other things happening. And each territory is different when we talk about the Amazon region. Brazil is going toward the green growth with public policies, with states that are well advanced in this process. And talking about states, I'm going to invite Marcello Lelis, the Secretary of the State of Environment in the state of Tocantins. He's going to be talking about the advancements and the progresses that the state is having. Good afternoon. I would like to thank Aliança. Thank you for the invitation. You are a friend for us. You were also secretary. You are very competent. And also, I would like to greet my colleagues in the panel. I also would like to talk about a very good partner we have, Geonoma. Bruno is here, Geonoma's team is here. They have been working with the state of Tocantins, building everything that we are building there. Also, I would like to greet Maia, the president of ABEMA, and all of you present. I actually have a presentation now. Can I stand up? Yeah, sure. Well, I'm going to present 5 slides about what we are actually developing in Tocantins. This is our region. We are in Matopiba. I guess it's the largest agricultural border in the country and actually in the world. So it covers Bahia and other states. Here we have the information about the territory, population, the biomes that we have, such as Cerrado. But this slide is actually showing the development of a reasoning. Let's put it this way. Tocantins economy and the GDP comes from the agribusiness. When we developed the jurisdictional program in the state, when we made this decision, we imagined that what is actually happening today, we already knew, which is the empowerment of environmental policy. And the environmental policy is equal to the agribusiness, to the GDP. The balance that the jurisdictional RED provides is what I would like to highlight here in this first slide. Of course, RED, we don't want to stop the development of the state or stop the agribusiness from developing. We actually want to balance that. We want the agribusiness to dialogue with us towards the sustainable development. How did we make this decision then? Fagner is responsible for the company. In Tocantins, we have a private and public company. Topar opened a public notice, and the public notice was presented to the world. We said to the world that we had a well-developed project and we were looking for partners. 3 world companies presented themselves, and Mercuria from Switzerland actually was the winner of this public notice. In 2023, we went to Geneva, and the agreement was signed. And it established a purchase agreement from Mercuria, and naturally we need to certify the credits, which is the purchase agreement scope. And also we have a picture there. You can see Mary was in Baku when Tocantins sanctioned the registration document. So these are important highlights of this journey. Now I'm going to talk about the jurisdictional. I'm going to defend that, but I'm not going to defend that against the private projects. I think we need to coexist. We need to grow together. A private project in a territory that is strengthened by a jurisdictional project is more valuable than a private project that doesn't have a policy established. In Tocantins, we have a lot of departments involved, FUNAI, TC, MPE, the prosecutor's office. Every single one are participating in this process. This slide shows that to you. The journey before the certification, it's complex, live, and transformative. This is real. This is a fantastic journey. And the complexity of a jurisdictional project is high. And now we see the workshops we conducted. We conducted 52 workshops with traditional populations, indigenous populations, quilombolas, and communities. We have 6 workshops with the agribusiness, because agribusiness participation is important in all stages of the project. We conducted 5 workshops and we have another one in the future. And also the government is involved on that, because the original and traditional populations, they need to be there, and the government and the agribusiness. So all of them together. So we talk about who will be impacted by this program. Here is my slide that shows that we are in the pre-certification stage of credits, but the results are already concrete. If you can please, if you can access our panel, sigma.gov.br. It's an amazing platform because management is data, right? You can only manage through data. Sigma is a very modern platform. If you access, you can see the rural profile in the state divided by several categories, including data of 40 years back. We are in the wildfire season, and we have data about that from the past. This was financed by the jurisdictional program in the state. Iara from Santiago Sintra is there, and they were hired with resources of pre-investment of the carbon program, for our analysis module, and for both of them to converge. Santiago and Sintra had to develop that. We are finishing this project now, and we're going to take a leap on the car analysis in Brazil soon. The calculations of RAD, MRV, you know what I'm talking about here, but we needed to have this organized. And the protagonism is so important to the state. This was in the Climate Week. This was in the Natural History Museum in London. And Brazil was a protagonist of this event held in London. And most of the leaders and authorities, they were attending the event. And Tocantins actually was a protagonist. This was amazing for the state, and also to open more doors. For example, now we are establishing a new project in a state park. Geonoma is actually conducting this work, and this is a consequence of the policy and also the resources that will be included. They show the importance of that. We'll be ending the workshop soon, so these are the next steps. Ending the workshops, having online consultation so that every person in the population of Tocantins can give their opinion. We'll also have the public audience. Also the TMR protocol, because after endorsing the registration document in Baku, we received the first responses. Then we actually they asked questions, we answered, and they asked more questions, and now I think the process is coming to the end. We also have the verification. We record the credits. They are the resources are included in the climate fund. And lastly, the implementation. We want that to happen soon. We are working day and night to make it happen and to have a conclusion of the implementation. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Marcello. Two companies of Aliança were mentioned about the contribution of the private market, even the University of Carbon. We need to increase the technical capacity in Brazil, the technical qualification, and also the implementation of RED, ALM, and others. I think that this exchange of information is fundamental. Since this panel is about the alignment, in this new round, I want to provoke you to reflect on the recently approved law that covers the environment of coexistence of jurisdictional projects with the private projects. And I would like to start with Roberta. What is essential? How can the federal government implement the law and to have this alignment? We know that the frameworks and the guidelines for that, they will come with the regulation process, but in your perspective, what is fundamental in this process? Thank you for the question. Considering the responsibilities of CONARED, it's important to talk on behalf of CONARED because the law already covers the titularity, and this should be aligned. And the law highlights consultation, informed consultation. So including and guaranteeing this in the process is important. We have a good definition of what would be a local level of a project or a jurisdictional level of a project, considering the public policies. This is different because when you mention that, the need of people to understand better some concepts, we are going through this process of qualifying in all levels of the society because everyone should understand what is a local project and what is a jurisdictional program as a public policy. And what is important for safeguards is that the 75% of the RED projects, they should be directed to the populations in the forests. And beyond that, the guidelines that will be launched by CONARED soon, and we hope that this happens in the near future, the mechanisms for resolution of complaints should be a process as well. How do you provide technical support at different levels? This should be a continuous process. And excluding the areas, this is a topic because the law brings a very specific role for CONARED. Currently, we are not responsible for an alignment process, but a manager of SPCR would have a project that is alignment to the strategy, and eventually they would participate in a regulated market. They could be a CRVE in SPCE. This is a process that is evolving and should be debated in the regulation process. I guess people from Fazenda, the Department of Economy, and they will be here tomorrow. We have a specific work group for SBCE. We also have a group to understand how they are related. So how the forest carbon will be part of SPCE or how this is going to happen. This process has been intensely discussed in MMA and SBC, but we are concerned with the journey of 10 years, because the 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 states, they were able to raise funds, and Brazil was always respected in the environmental process because everything we did was in a participative manner. We have monitoring data and systems that were implemented along the years. And to guarantee integrity for safeguards and measurement, we need to have reliable data. Much of the requirements to guarantee the environmental process is what we have been integrating, the measurement aspects as well. We want to have quality and transparency to avoid double accountability with the projects, and the goals are in common because we want to mitigate deforestation, mitigate the climate change, and we want that the projects at different levels and the initiatives, they have an impact to our bigger goal.
Thank you, Roberta. Fagner. Pará is moving forward on the law for this jurisdiction. How to establish this dialogue with private sector, thinking on this alignment. The bid of law, this bid for the jurisdiction of Pará is going through the CLPIs. Have a long way until this law get to the House of Representatives. But Pará is working his leadership with IETA, and IETA is coordinated this interaction with the private developers, looking for converging criteria for this alignment. One of the controversies we have on this alignment this jurisdiction, Tocantins, Pará, is submitted this arch tree. They are oriented to have conservatory metrics, its track record, and we try to take this being conservative to the private sector because it's necessary that these projects can bring proportional deductions to the potential of the generation of credits on these jurisdictions. We're not talking about a regulatory sandbox. It is much more. Our understanding to try to build this regulament with some developers. Interesting here is that we, being a state company, we feel the pain of the policymaker, and we understand as well the necessity to be more effective in a private way. In some point, a CAP is going to be developed through projects. Has some areas. And with these partnerships, the role of this company in this environment is to have this balance and forces this debate and this convergency. Thank you, Fagner. I would like for Lourdes to bring to us a little bit of the point of view of the private sector, aligning the jurisdictions on the law of market, how the private sector sees or establish these problem following the law. My colleagues, they were very clear about it, the double accounting. This is the main point of this alignment and the most relevant discussion. We need safety, we need safeguard on the commercialization of those credits. A point of view of ACX, we have the technologies, we have some functionalities on this platform that try to connect to these regulated environments. Being established the methodology that was mentioned here by Roberta. Making this accountability in the correct way, accountability, this makes possible for the commercialization of those credits on the platform, on ACX platform. But we have the same concerns on the alignment and jurisdiction. And it concerns me the alignment of those policies on credits. We feel this pain, seeing so many beautiful projects, so many beautiful initiatives being built with so much effort along so many years. And when this comes the moment for us to sell carbon credits, or even before, be able to make agreements with off-takers, we are not able to sell those credits or selling them by the value they deserve, by what they are worth it, by their worth. And this would be my main complaint. About this double accounting, the certificators, they have this new approach, a more conservative methodology. And tomorrow we're going to have the Minister of Finance here to talk about the governance on how it's going to be the regulation of this bit, this law, and the certificators, what is their point of view with the Brazilian law, how this is going to be established, and understanding here, before the panel, it was really nice to hear you, understanding the private projects and the jurisdictions should coexist. I would like to hear from you, how is your approach? Sure, I believe in that. As Roberta said, she explained it really well, remembering us which are the goals. At the end of the process, what do we want? Reduce deforestation, degradation. Reducing degradation, we can also talk about forest fires. That's what we want. We have, on my point of view, the duty to sit at the same table and find a way. Find this point where we converge to align our needs. Developers, producers, certificators, community, everybody should sit at the same table. That's the point. We have some interesting things happening now in Tocantins. And the pandemic helped the technology to move forward. And RED is helping Tocantins to move, advance, develop in environmental awareness, being in touch with the communities, traditional communities, indigenous populations, the private sector. We have opportunities for everybody. And we have many people looking to develop their projects in Tocantins, and they can go to the Environment Secretary because that's the touching point. Knowing that, we all get stronger. We can do this work together. And that's the spirit. Everybody at the same table, working together. I agree with you, and this panel here, with this plurality, express that we can get to regulation of this bit, aligning jurisdictionals and private projects, sitting at the same table and increasing dialogue and in need of commitment of the sectors represented here for us to be able to implement this agenda that you said, that where we have the same goal, reduce deforestation and guarantee the safeguard of those forests. And there was a big fight now on the indigenous population and traditional communities on the stock of carbon credits. So how can we increase the safeguard of credits? I would like to take the chance now with this panel to invite you as an alliance for the dialogue. When we can see the same table, private sector, federal government, state government, the representation for indigenous people and traditional communities, and all of us from our point of view, representing our sectors, we have a very important role in this process. I would like to open these our final moments for some questions, and I would like to ask for the help of our production so we can address the Q&A. Have a Q&A now. Good afternoon. I'd like to ask Mr. Secretary Marcello Lelis. We know that every new process, every new project generates some doubts and additional challenges. We learn with this in this journey. On your experience of RED in Tocantins, which is different than Mato Grosso and Pará, which were the main challenges and the mistakes you could share with us? So we can learn from it and not go through the same mistakes. Thank you. Failures. We did wrong communication. We went deep in the jurisdictional and legal aspects, and we forgot on communication. When we went after the communication, there was already a factor of fake news among the producers and farmers of Tocantins. And was built a narrative that we are trying to deconstruct this fake news, this narrative that was built. So first of all, we didn't finish the process now. We are very close to this certification. We are going to have that very soon. Until now, our biggest mistake was not to give the necessary attention to the communication from the beginning of the process. This is the main problem. And the main challenge is naturally to congregate the interests of every actor, the productive sector, traditional communities, small farmers, indigenous population, make the government as a whole, not only the Secretary of Environment, the government as a whole to move in this environment with different narratives, where we have a war of narratives by different interests, different proxies, people building narratives against the project. We have to deconstruct that all the time. That's the main challenge, to conciliate those interests. And my tip would be, pay attention to the communication since the beginning. Being a very interesting question, some panelists here want to complement this answer. First, communication. We are facing a mishmash of information here. Mishmash, CRE, is a soup of acronyms where everything is very hard to understand. So that's the necessity to do the right technical training of expertise, have the right translation of these acronyms, and understanding it is a big challenge. I would like to open here for the other panelists to answer as well. It was a great answer. The challenge of communication in this agenda, yes, is a lettuce soup. This process of training, of building expertise inside the government and on the same segue, it's very important to keep a line of dialogue open with different sectors, governance, CONRAD, it work in task forces, but it's open. It's important to have this open dialogue with CBS, the states. We'd like to reinforce the MMA is open to support this process of communication. When you think that we start understand the agenda of RAD, the law comes and changes everything. You have to reinterpret the law and rebuild and adjust to the new parameters. In this sense, it's important to mention that we are making this movement with the states to improve our communication, to bring the understanding to everybody. In August, we're going to have a conference in Brasilia with all states from Legal Amazonia to discuss all concepts, what are we interpreting from the law, how we as a Ministry of Environment understand that. I would like to mention now the Ministry of Environment is with you to support in this communication that's very challenging, not only for the states, but also for the ministry. Let's talk about this success as well. I'm going to talk one success and one failure. There's not a recipe. Marcello have success in many points, but community engagement was a win on the qualifications, which brought a very happy climate for the CLPs, CLPIs. They are being solicited. We would like to have one more here. Those who go to Pará at the COP. They are very happy. They were very fruitful. They were very successful. And about failures, we'd like to bring to the debate this whole complexity that the theme brings. I come from a time that the public ministry was fighting deforestation, not RED. Pará, we are having this problem now. The public policies that bring benefits to the people from the forest is being fought. I believe that this comes from the complexity of that time. And we need to be the agents of control for this public debate. There's another aspect that can be close to this agenda, dive with us in this agenda. Being an environment for innovation, nothing here is new, but how many years this is being debated since the Paris Agreement, on the rule books we had since the Paris Agreement. We went through so many alterations that want to create a strategic environment for financing and mechanisms that are going to make the funds get to that destination. And every country that integrates this group of countries for climate in UN. Brazil is doing its homework. We have failure and successes. It's not easy in this innovation environment to be able to value environmental asset, changing it into a credit, monetize it, and share the resources, the funds after. This is complex and necessary. And to conclude our panel, I would like to share that the understanding of why we're doing that, why we created RED, that's to guarantee the protection and conservation of forests. And with that, The social environmental development. I said here in the opening of this conference, and I repeat myself again now, that's the necessity to implement projects that can reflect some economic and social development on the territory, on the land. My view from the Amazonia, I'm son of a father that lost his sight extracting rubber, and that's the history of my life. Being able to build in these territories this discussion to the forest for those who need it. Not only policy making on the projects that are more focused on the daily life of those people. Having the communities assuming their role, their leadership, fostering funds, selecting projects, so we can gather efforts to be part of this green agenda and have environment of integrity facing the challenges we have in different sectors. Thank you. It was a great panel with great contributions with different point of views. Thank you very much.